A pleasant day to you all. We are the Group 1, and in this presentation, we are going to talk about the policies for inclusive education for children and youth with disabilities. Right from the beginning of the world, every human being were made equal. There were no preys and predators, and the word boss, leaders, or president does not exist, but only the word God. God created humans in His own image for them to represent Him instead of God doing the managing all by Himself. Also, we are tasked to maintain the equality of everything in this slightly oblate world of ours so that the world will not experience the wrath of being unbalanced. Just like what happened in heaven millions of years ago before the earth was made, and unluckily, everything didn't go as planned. All of this is of course based only in the Bible. And you are listening to me right now because you are curious about how important the life of a single person is. The point is, we're still humans even though we have our own differences and disabilities. In this presentation, you will learn about some of God's given rights to us, the people, that obviously most of us doesn't really understand because we are all here right now studying it. We hope you learn a lot from this presentation about special and inclusive education. There are about 1.4 million persons with disability or PWDs that comprises 1.57% of the 92.1 million Philippine population. 1 of 5 or 20% of the PWDs are school-aged children and adolescents aged 5 to 19 years, of whom children aged 10 to 14 years or 7.2% constitute the largest proportion across the different age groups. Meaning to say there are a lot more younger PWDs than older ones. Studies show that rights of most PWDs across the Philippines were disregarded and violated regularly. Almost all of the PWDs face discrimination and other hedges of barriers, which prevents them from having full social participation, access to health services, gainful employment, and inclusion in the educational system. Having something that stops you from doing the things you like and gives you boundaries in specific aspects of life really seems so unfair. But luckily, we have the 1987 Philippine Constitution, which consists of many different principles and laws, especially the laws about PWDs, like the Child and Youth Welfare Code or PD 603, the Special Protection of Children Against Child Abuse, Exploitation and Discrimination Act or RA 7610, the Early Years Act RA 10410, the Enhanced Basic Education Act or RA 10533, the Magna Carta for Disabled Persons amended by RA 9442 or RA 7277, and the Policies and Guidelines in Special Education, and many more. Also, a special thanks to this guy, Mr. Senator Cheese Escudera, for sponsoring the Inclusive Education Bill. Doesn't he look good? I'm just kidding. Anyways, let us now hear more information from my co-reporter here, Mr. Chow.
Now, what is inclusive education? According to UNESCO, inclusive education is the fundamental right of the younger generation to education. According to them, it's a dynamic approach on seeing individual differences but as opportunities for learning. It's addressing and responding to the diversity needs of learners by assessing what their needs are and making programs in line with their needs. UNESCO also identified 4 key elements of inclusion. Number 1 is that inclusion is a process. Number 2, inclusion is concerned with the identification and removal of barriers. Number 3, inclusion is about the presence, participation, and achievements of all students. And lastly, number 4, it involves a particular emphasis on these groups of learners which may be at risk of marginalization, exclusion, or underachievement. What is this UNCPRD? This granted PWDs all rights regardless of their age for inclusive education at all levels without discrimination. Shown in the screen are what state parties should ensure when implementing the UNCPRD. Number one of this is that children with disabilities are not excluded from free and compulsory primary education or from secondary education. Adults with disabilities have access to general tertiary education, vocational training, adult education, and lifelong learning. Number 3, persons with disabilities receive the necessary support within the general education system to facilitate their effective education, and effective individualized support measures are put in place to maximize academic and social development. And in order to implement this, state parties should take appropriate measures such as endorsing the learning of Braille, alternative script, augmentative and alternative modes, means and formats of communication and orientation and mobility skills, and of course, facilitating peer support and mentoring. Number 2 is that supporting the learning of sign language and promoting the linguistic identity of the deaf community. Advocating that education of persons, particularly children who are blind and or deaf, is delivered in the most appropriate languages and means of communication for the individual. And of course, teachers with disabilities qualified in sign language or Braille should be employed. By the shift in perspective of the PWDs, it had shaped policy direction globally in the country. Philippines reaffirmed the World Program of Action concerning disabled persons, and this paved way for Republic Act 7277. Republic Act 7277, or the Philippine Magna Carta for Disabled Persons in 1992, identifies and provides rights for all PWDs, including their education. This law ensures that PWDs are protected and not discriminated. Philippines also became the 23rd country fully committed to protect the rights for education for the PWDs by signing and ratified UNCPRD in 1998.
Sorry about that. Miss Churchill's recordings was corrupted, so but what she was supposed to say is 1992. So yeah, thank you for watching.